As far as a plan for today, so a topic as we know is about everything that you need to know about the Golden Visa. For those that are just setting out on the journey to Portugal, I'm going to cover off the basics as to what the program is, how it works, who can qualify, what the requirements are, what the process and timeline is to get the visa, and of course the passport for Europe as well. I'll give you an up-to-date overview on the latest investment criteria as well, which changed quite drastically at the end of 2023. You'll be pleased to know no further changes from June, but we'll cover that as well. I mentioned I'll cover off around, only briefly, as it may not apply to everyone on the webinar this evening, but I'll cover off why more and more people seem to be using now their retirement accounts as a way to fund the Golden Visa as well, rather than using cash assets or liquidating other assets to fund the investment. We mentioned about one of the topics being the ability to qualify for the visa with less than the 500,000 of your own capital as well. There are now investments available in Portugal that will allow you to invest as little as 315,000 euros and still qualify with an investment of 500. So I'll explain more about how that works as well. Also, hot off the press for this month is now the option that, again, within Portugal, there are financing companies now available to fully finance the 500,000 euros needed to qualify for the visa. There is a fee involved for that of 168,000 euros. And over a 6-year period, you can work out what that is as an equivalent interest. But it is still, of course, a much lower amount of capital needed compared to the donation option in Portugal, which is still set at 250,000. So we'll cover that off briefly as well. We'll talk about how your kind of current timelines, how long it's taken to get the visa and the passport. There's some relatively recent changes in law as well, which is great, welcome news for everybody looking to set sail for Portugal. And again, I'll just touch on one or two kind of hot picks of investments currently out there in Portugal with a bit of a guide as to the type of things that we're looking for. Other than that, yeah, we'll cover as many slides. So to get through those, we'll jump into a Q&A. Please do drop in questions as we go through. I will come to those at the end. And yeah, without further ado, we should get stuck in. So my name is Jason Swan. I'm one of the senior partners here at Holborn Assets. I've lived in Portugal myself now for 3 years, not too long. My Portuguese is still non-existent, but I'm kind of picking up one word per year. I'm down in the south in a town called Albufeira in the Algarve. And previous to Portugal, I lived in Spain, in Malaga for 5 years. And previous to Malaga, I was here actually in Manchester in the UK. I've recently advised, I've now done over 150, 160 applications for the Golden Visa since, just over the past 2 years, actually. And as a company, we've now done over 10% of the world's Golden Visa applications since the program was launched. And we maintain a 100% success rate on those applications as well. So we're very well versed in what's involved. And of course, we're in a great position to help with any questions. Also, I'm fully qualified and regulated as a financial planner in Portugal. I spend a lot of my time helping my clients structure their assets and their income in line with the Portuguese tax law, which is only, of course, needed when you become tax resident in Portugal, which won't happen until you physically spend over 6 months of the year here. However, yeah, any questions you have on the money side, on visa side, any questions around generally living in Portugal, I like to think I'm a pretty handy guy to ask along the way. But enough about me. As far as the company, Holborn Assets, we set up back in 1998. Primarily, we're a wealth management practice, a global wealth management practice. And about 6 years back, we opened a department of Holborn Assets called Holborn Passport, which is a dedicated team, if you like, to assisting our clients achieve residency and citizenship by way of investment in different countries around the world. And part of what that service is to facilitate pretty much everything that you need to get you from where you are now to actually getting a passport in your hand, whether it be in Portugal or on one of other programs. But yeah, we'll try and make it as easy as possible. You have myself and my team here to support you right the way through. So you have one point of contact and we facilitate all the different moving parts along that way, which we'll talk about shortly. So, just a brief note on the other programs. Again, if you're not maybe set specifically on just Portugal, it may be worth a discussion around the other routes into Europe. The second most popular route to Europe, I would say, is Spain at the moment, right next door. There is also a route through Greece and also Malta as well. Portugal is by far the most popular route to Portugal. Sorry, Portugal is the most popular route to Europe because it has, first of all, the smallest amount of time to get a passport. It's only 5 years through Portugal, whereas if you compare that to Spain, it's actually 10 years. Greece is 7 years. Malta is the only country which you can get a European passport through faster than Portugal, but the minimum capital requirement is over €1 million. So at the current levels, Portugal is by far the most popular. And also, there is only Portugal and Malta that can allow you to get a passport without physically moving to the country as well. So all of the countries in Europe, you have to change your tax residency to that country and live there for over 6 months of the year for a period of time. Spain, for example, you have to live in Spain for 10 years before you get the passport. Portugal, however, you only have to be in Portugal for just 1 week in every year, or 2 weeks every 2 years formally, and you can still be on the path to get a passport in 5 years from now. Again, any questions on the other programs, just feel free to drop me an email. You'll have my details, of course, from my email this morning. But for today, we're, of course, going to focus on my personal favourite, the Portugal Golden Visa. So what is the visa? Ultimately, it is a golden ticket to live, work, retire, sunbathe without any restrictions in Portugal. And the visa lasts for 2 years. And you can renew the visa every 2 years for as long as you like. However, after 5 years have passed since you applied for the visa, you can apply for your passport and permanent residency. You don't have to do both. Some nationalities don't allow dual nationality, therefore, we often just apply for permanent residency. But for the majority, we will apply for the passport and the permanent rights to reside as well. But yeah, it's the most popular route, as I say, by quite some way. There's now been over 11,000 successful applications for the country. It's in the region around 97% success rate from visa to citizenship. There are, of course, some key caveats to make sure you do to be successful with the passport application. But in the main, it's pretty straightforward. It was heavily talked about last year. The program was that close. I don't know if you can see how close that is, but that close to being closed towards the end of November 2023. There was a last minute U-turn and the program lived to see another day. And we just saw one major change, which was the removal of property investment as a type of investment that will qualify for the visa. But other than that, it's exactly the same as it always has been. And so that is what he got for grabs. I think I've covered the majority there. Like I say, Holborn, we've now done over 10% of the world's golden visa applications for Portugal. And yeah, it is, the immigration statistics to the country are accelerating quite rapidly, in particular from the US at the moment. I'm hearing a lot more kind of political motivations to have one B, which certainly for the people I'm speaking with, not necessarily moving to Portugal straight away, but using the visa and the passport as kind of a get out of Dodge. Is that a get out of Dodge pass, if you like, in the future? Whereas, should you decide in the future to move, but you have a passport ready to go, because the minimum stay is, like I say, it's only 2 weeks every 2 years. You basically just have to have a holiday in Portugal every couple of years, and 5 years from now, you're going to have a European passport to use, and of course for your family as well. So it's a great plan B. Often, again, a lot of my clients are maybe thinking of a retirement plan. Often comes up around the benefits of their children being able to study in Europe as well. Amongst healthcare, I'm actually jumping on to my next slide in advance. So the number key benefits to why people are choosing Portugal. But as I mentioned, the route to passport and freedom, travel within the EU without any restrictions is the main plus. You get access to your family for your family to study in Europe as well. The healthcare system in Portugal is one of the best in the world, and yet compared to other countries, that can be a significant cost saving as well. It's an English-speaking country to a certain extent, obviously. Formerly, I think Brazilian, but the English is very widely spoken, certainly down in the south. And when I'm speaking to local Portuguese, they often say, you literally couldn't survive without speaking English because a lot of the income, certainly in the south, is driven by tourism. So it's essential to speak English. Portuguese also speak English in school. But unlike my time in Spain, where I always made me feel like a bit of an outsider in Spain because I didn't speak the language fluently. In Portugal, I always feel very welcome. You see an instant difference between the two countries when you walk into a restaurant. And that is, I think, they're appreciative of the tourism. Slightly under question of late, but as a whole, appreciative of the tourism, but also they study the language in school, so they quite welcome the chance to practice their English when they get the chance as well. So that's a nice plus. Obviously, if you go more inland to Portugal, you'll find less English speakers, but if you're in the main cities such as Lisbon, Porto, and down in the south, you're generally okay. You're not going to go far wrong as far as the quality of life. Probably don't need too much convincing on that front. I'm a big fan of the south, which we'll come on to in a moment, but you're not going to have too shabby of a life living anywhere in Portugal, in my opinion. And other than that, like I say, it is only 7 days per year to get the citizenship. It's very unique. It has major airport in Lisbon. You can get to anywhere in Europe within a couple of hours flight, and internationally, of course, from the main airport. And there are still tax incentives. Now, the NHR program 1.0 did finish at the end of 2023. There is 2.0 to be announced, which is not unfortunately going to be quite as attractive as the first one, but will still offer some benefits for those that are still working, whether employed or self-employed. If you are under a particularly highly skilled category, you can apply for a flat rate of income tax of just 20%. But yeah, NHR 1.0 was more designed towards residual income or passive income, such as pensions, such as rental income, such as dividend income, all of which could be completely tax-free for 10 years. And I think I'll look back on that one day and think, wow, how did that happen? But yeah, complete tax-free dividends for 10 years, tax-free rental income for 10 years. Pension income was capped at 10%. So the program did end at the end of 2023. However, if you did start your journey to Portugal before the cutoff last year, as long as you applied before the end of 2024, you can still apply to NHR 1.0, which is the best one. So if any questions on that, again, please do ask, and I can point you in the right direction. Now, I thought I'd just kind of show you Portugal. It's amazing how many people I speak to that literally have never been to Portugal, although looking at the Golden Visa. So I thought I'd give everyone a little geography lesson, which wasn't my strong point at school, unfortunately, but here's everything that you need to know. So that's a map of Portugal. You've got the city centre in Lisbon, which is where, it is the most populated, it is the most commercial, it is the best location for those looking for employment. You have the best part of Portugal, which is down here in the south, which is where I'm in the Algarve. Of course, I'm very biased towards the south, but it is slightly warmer. The beaches are second to none, but it is a very much more relaxed lifestyle, if you like, and for some might find quite boring. It depends what you're after. But Porto is kind of a bit of a mix of the two, more built up than the south, not quite as commercial as Lisbon, but very picturesque, incredible part of Portugal as well. Of course, you have inland. If you fancy living where no one can find you, if you want to live off the grid and maybe set up a farm, then yeah, inland Portugal. There's a lot of green generally in Portugal, great views as well. And of course, you have Madeira, which is a very small island off the coast of Portugal as well. Also, right, comes under the main header. So yeah, there you go. That's everything that you need to know on Portugal. But of course, with Google Maps and Google Earth, you can see it for yourself as well. Now, Let's get stuck into the detail. So the investment criteria for the Golden Visa changed last at the end of last year. As I mentioned before, the main change was that property investment is now no longer um, included in the potential investment criteria. You can still buy property, it's very much welcome, but it simply won't qualify for the rights to stay in Portugal. So if you do have plans to buy or rent, you will need to run a separate investment alongside that to get the rights to stay and, of course, get the passport. So as it stands, option number one is you can set up a business and you can create jobs if you wish. And if you create 10 of them, that is a way to get the visa. Second and third is ultimately to make a donation to the country of 250 or 500,000, which predominantly is not that popular. I don't know if I've actually ever done a donation application, but it is there nonetheless if anyone's feeling generous. The most common, of course, routes to the visa are those that consist of keeping your money and, of course, making some at the same time where possible. And you can do that by way of investing into a venture capital fund on the basis that that fund meets certain criteria, which we'll come on to in a moment. Or you can invest into the share capital of an existing Portuguese company on the basis that that capital is going to be used towards the maintenance or the creation of jobs. So that's it basically. Those are the 5 routes at the moment. So you can build a business and take people on, which I wouldn't recommend unless you already have plans to build a business in Portugal. It's probably a little bit too hands-on and time heavy simply to get a visa. You can make a donation, like I say, if you're feeling generous. Very viable option, which is as simple. It does exactly what it says in the tin. You are just donating a sum of money to Portugal. And there are the different investment options, which we're going to cover in some detail shortly. Hope that's nice and clear. Get any questions out there, Marty? If any questions, just drop a message in on the Q&A, and we'll come back to that shortly. Okay, right. So let me cover this off. So this slide to explain shows you the different entry points now of capital that you need as an investor to qualify for the visa. Now, we've just covered off the minimum capital needed for the different routes, but there are different ways of getting to those minimums. And I thought this would be quite an interesting slide to add, because these are the current, as of today's date, the current capital requirements to get into the program in one way or another. Now, I mentioned before that there are companies now that will be able to fully finance an investment of the 500,000, and the lowest fee of which that I can certainly see out there is 168,000 euros, which is still a good chunk of change. But if you are not too fussed about investing and are considering maybe a donation of 250, by the same concepts, the 168,000 actually would still save you quite a good amount of cash. Although I wouldn't necessarily support giving money away. Personally, I like to invest and get that money back and make the most of my money. But like I say, if you want to get in the visa with as little money as possible and keep as much cash to yourself, then that may be a new route in, and to have a new lower minimum 168 will be very attractive for some. The donation that we've covered is 250,000. The investment routes then start with a capital requirement of 315,000 from the investor. And this is based on 1 or 2 particular investments currently available. I say that lightly because I need to check availability, but as it stands, there are investments that pay an upfront return as well. So rather than an annual return from an investment fund, for example, you can have basically 6 years return all paid up front for a big lump sum. One of which paid 111,000 up front and offers a loan facility for 74,000 euros, which makes up to the 500,000 that's required to qualify. The other option, very similar, is at 399, which basically doesn't feature a loan option. The return is slightly lower, but still a good return of 101,000. Again, reducing the investor capital requirement to 399. And of course, the standard 500,000 covers off all other investment routes, as we looked at a moment ago. So I just wanted to break that down slightly. I hope that makes sense, but that should open the window somewhat to those looking to get involved with minimum capital rather than having to find the full 500,000 themselves. So hopefully that's helpful. And again, any questions on those, please do ask or send me an email. So some recent-ish news: the time to citizenship has now been reduced. 3 months back, the government changed the law that now will allow the initial kind of 12 to 18 months that's required to get the visa to now contribute towards the 5 years that you need for the passport. Until recently, it was kind of basically waiting for the visa and then a fresh 5 years to begin once that's in hand. But now, yeah, it's a total of 5 years, which is excellent news. So everybody waiting for a visa knows that any delays are not going to impact the time that it takes to get the passport. And also those getting involved with the program know and can make plans for having a passport like in 5 years' time, rather than maybe seven years' time. That's good. Great news on that front. As far as who can qualify for the visa, so some golden visa basics now. So no, you can't already be a European citizen. As the first thing, obviously, if you're already a European citizen, you don't need the visa anyway. But that's rule number one. Second is that you must have a pretty clean criminal record. We have had success for clients that have had some blemishes on the criminal record. But as long as there's nothing on there that would have resulted in jail time in Portugal, then you should be okay on that front. But the cleaner the better. Of course, we'll ask for a copy of the criminal record as part of the requirements for the application. So we'll be able to assess that very early in the process and, of course, let you know of any potential problems. And, of course, make an eligible investment in line with the criteria that we've just covered off. And to maintain the visa, to stay at least 14 days in any 2-year period is basically it, which is not too bad, is it? Having to spend a couple of weeks in Portugal every couple of years, but that's it. That is the simple criteria. As long as you tick those 4 boxes, you'll qualify for the visa, and there are no other requirements. There's no age restrictions, no income requirement or savings requirements or anything like that. Very, very clear. Just before I move on, actually, just to add to that, the only thing in addition to those that you need to get the passport in 5 years is that during that time, you do need to either study a course in Portuguese or actually pass an exam to an A2 standard by the time we apply for citizenship, which is the equivalent of kind of age 16 study, if you will. And the majority of my clients are doing one of two things: either kind of gradually actually learning the language over that period, or doing simply a crash course, to kind of pass the test, which seems to be taking about 3 months. You can kind of get an online tutor and just learn to pass the test. And as long as you've done that at some point during the 5 years, you're all good. Of course, don't get arrested during those 5 years. And that's about it. Like I say, you've got to maintain that minimum stay, keep a clean criminal record, keep the investment, of course, and learn some Portuguese. And that's it, when you get the passport. Now, as far as which family members can be included, the way it works is there's one main applicant, okay, and that main applicant can add a number of family members to the same application, should they wish. That includes the spouse by default. Married or unmarried is fine, as long as you live at the same address. There's no problem. You can include children on the same application up to the age of 21. Up to 21 is automatically assumed. However, maybe they can be added above 21 as well, but we must then prove dependency in some way. So whether they're still in further education or financially dependent in some way, that's only evidence of that is only needed if they're older than 21. Up to that age, it's automatically assumed. Parents can be included over the age of 65 without any proof of dependency. Again, if parents are younger than 65, we do need to prove dependency. Often we kind of change also who is the main applicant. So depending on the family's ages, we might be able to For example, put the main applicant as one of your children and have you as their dependent, or vice versa, to get as many people as possible on the same application. But of course, we'll talk through that when we meet one to one, and yeah, hopefully that gives you a good idea in the meantime. But it's designed to get kind of three generations overall on one application where you can, and of course, all the family then benefit from the travel throughout Europe, the right to healthcare, the right to study, of course, the right to live in Portugal. So, okay, so a bit of a busy slide, but I'm going to crash through. So this is basically a summary of everything that happened behind the scenes whilst we're processing your application for the visa. Now, step one, of course, is to decide on an investment. And once you have decided on the investment, we'll then begin the process of applying for your Portuguese tax numbers. And thereafter, we can apply to set up your Portuguese bank account. You can't do a lot without those two things. And setting up the bank account generally takes the longest amount of time of all the things that we've got to do. You do have the option to fly into Portugal, which sometimes can make that a little faster, but it's not essential. And we will simply crack on with that and set up the bank account on your behalf. Once the account is ready, once you've met with the acting law firm, once you've completed the investment contracts and the power of attorney, the lawyer will give you the green light to transfer the investment monies to your new Portuguese bank account. And then from there, you will complete the investment, and then your application can be submitted to AIMA. AIMA is the immigration office, if you like, or the borders agency. They've recently taken over from SEP. And yeah, the application is done online by the lawyers, and then off we go. That is actually the starting point of that 5-year clock then to get the passport. So yeah, as soon as we get to that point, the sooner, of course, the sooner the passport will be applied for. And that's the first part. From there, we simply then really wait for the biometrics appointment, which we kind of guesstimating around 12 to 18 months at the moment for our biometrics, which is the only time at which you need to actually have to come to Portugal. Everything else until that point can be done remotely. All contract signing is done through Zoom. Original documentation is collected by courier. And myself and my team will liaise with all the different parties and yourself remotely. But we cannot do your fingerprints for you, and we can't take your photograph. Technically, we could, but it's got to be done live at the AIMA office to do your biometrics. So we'll let you know as soon as that appointment is booked. You'll be accompanied by a member of the team on the day to help you with the language and to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible. It's always a pretty soul-destroying day with AIMA. No matter how organised you are, there will be some queuing. It will be the worst day of your trip, but it is what it is, and we will be there to keep you entertained, nonetheless. I actually lost my residency card myself a little while back, and I had to reapply for my residency card, and it was very tricky. And I went to AIMA. Where did I go? I went to Lisbon first of all. Queued up for about an hour or so. I got to the front of the queue, and AIMA told me that the computer was down. Amazingly, out of all these, there must have been 200 people waiting. But for my case, the computer was down apparently, and I had to reschedule. They then rescheduled me an appointment up in Porto, which is even further away from where I live. And anyway, without going off on a tangent, it can be difficult sometimes dealing with AIMA, but we do that on your behalf, and we'll simply keep you up to date as things progress, and we'll be helping you collect all the documents necessary to do that application as well. So thereafter, shortly after the biometrics, we would expect to receive your visa card, which will look a little like this one at the bottom. Not actually golden, to my surprise when I first saw it, but it is a visa nonetheless. And that'll be valid, as we mentioned before, then for 2 years. So yeah, hopefully that's nice and clear. Like I said, loads going on. Don't worry too much about remembering all this. This is more, like I said, what happened behind the scenes. We'll make it nice and easy throughout the process for you, but just to give you an idea. Now, once you have the visa, like I said, to kind of do all that we've just covered, it will take around about anywhere between kind of 2 to 3 months by the time we've set up the bank account, the tax numbers, and everything else that's involved to submit the application. I would expect to get the visa approval within around 12 to 18 months. We are seeing the AIMA office start to process applications faster, certainly compared to SEF. Last year, we're seeing waiting times reduce slightly. And for new applications now, we're pretty confident that they're hitting somewhere between that 12 to 18-month mark to get the visa. Now, that visa, as we mentioned, will last for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, which will be around about 3 to 3.5 years from now, I will need to do the first renewal. We'll renew the visas for a further 2 years, which will take you up to kind of the end of year 5, kind of year 5 to year 6. Now, of course, it's now at the end of year 5 that we can apply for citizenship, whereas before it was 5 years plus about 18 months. So we always had to do at least 2 renewals during that process. Now, with the new laws, it's worth noting that there is a very good chance that you won't need to do the second renewal because that first renewal will actually take you past the 5 years that you need now to apply for your passport. So that is, again, really good news, and we'll save a lot in taxes and government fees to do that. But just be mindful that obviously if miraculously the application goes through super fast or the passport application takes a little bit longer, there may still need to be a second renewal, but maybe not. And we can only hope. We'll try our best to make sure it's just the one, of course. But other than that, like I said, at the end of year 5, we apply for the passport, and that's it. And I've just put these little handy gifts just in case it wasn't clear enough to remember to A, apply for the Golden Visa, B, study Portuguese. I should put a little man running out of jail maybe in there as well to not get arrested, keep a clean criminal record, and then you get the passport. Simple. And then if you do all that, it is mission complete. And you'll then officially have the 4th best passport in the world. You'll have visa-free travel to over 190 countries, and of course, full right to live in any of the European states. And that's one point I missed off, actually, that visa-free travel is taken for granted for some of us. I mean, certainly coming from the UK or from the US, we already have visa-free travel to the majority of the world. But I'm sure there's many people on the call at the moment that have to fill out visa forms every time you want to go on holiday. And by having the visa, that is no longer required. You have complete visa-free travel then, like I said, to over 190 countries. Whoa. So that's where we're up to so far. So thank you for your questions so far. We can see some questions coming in. I will be sure to come to those before we finish. Any questions on what I've covered, please do drop them in the Q&A. I'll make sure we cover everything before we finish this evening. But that hopefully gives everyone a good idea of what's involved to get a Golden Visa and how you can join me in Portugal, whether it be down in the south or whichever part you may choose. So let's get stuck into the investment. That's a bit of housekeeping. So, of course, as we mentioned, the Golden Visa is an investment visa, and there are many different ways to invest to qualify, as we've covered, and there are many different sectors to invest into as well. Portugal isn't, I mean, certainly for my wealth management clients, I don't often look at Portugal as the first port of call to invest. It's not really seen as a financial centre compared to the likes of the US and the UK. But there are different sectors to invest into, and of course, we must meet the requirements to get the visa. So these are some of the more kind of prominent investment sectors within Portugal at the moment. And whether you're investing into an existing Portuguese company or if you're investing into a regulated fund, there are a range of industries that you may choose. One industry in particular you'll hear me talking a lot about is the hospitality and the tourism industry, which, for obvious reasons, is one of the most successful and rapidly increasing sectors in Portugal. Often you'll find more attractive investment options, often high levels of security for your investment as well, and some strong profit potential. So yeah, hospitality and tourism are two of my favorites, but yeah, there are many different sectors to explore. Just be sure to remember that if you're going down the investment fund route, which is option number 1, the fund must meet the following criteria. First of all, it must be regulated in Portugal by the Portuguese Securities Commission. Okay, it cannot be an American fund or a UK fund or a Spanish fund. It has to be a Portuguese fund regulated by the Portuguese Securities Commission. The fund cannot directly or indirectly invest into any kind of real estate, okay, which is one of the changes made just last year. The fund must also hold at least 60% of its assets in Portuguese securities as well. So you'll find that there's funds with Portuguese banks, for example, where it'll be regulated in Portugal, but the fund will invest in the US or outside of Portugal. But it's got to tick both boxes. It has to be a Portuguese fund investing in Portugal. And of course, as we talked about before, the minimum is 500,000. And it's important that you keep that same investment fund throughout the duration to make sure there's no gaps of investment during that 5-year time frame. And of course, once you have received the passport, there is then no longer a need to keep the fund should you not need to or wish to. In total, there are around about 25 to 30 funds that you'll find out there with different providers and different institutions that will meet that criteria for the visa. Of course, we will always, when we're speaking, I will always introduce you to reputable fund managers to help with the fund selection. But if you are doing your own research as well, and you'd simply like us to process the application for the visa, just be sure to be mindful of some of these key points. This is my kind of top tips, if you like, for doing your own fund research. And I might be teaching some of you things that you already know, but of course, number one, and has to be number one, is of course the security of the investment capital. Portugal, as I mentioned before, is not a financial epicenter of the world. The financial sector is not, shall we say, as robust as other parts of the globe. And there are some wild and wacky venture capital funds that I have seen, which carry with them huge amounts of risk. And we won't go into those now, but be sure that you understand the security of the capital and the investment, and where possible, trying to have some form of asset-backed protection as well, should anything happen to the fund. They're rare to come by, but it's a great extra level of protection to look for. Be mindful of how long the capital is tied up for. In total, you're going to need around about 6 years to stay invested, maybe a little longer. But you don't want to be tied up for more than that. If you think about removing the restrictions of the Golden Visa, the chances are you probably wouldn't choose to invest in that very restrictive fund list of 25 to 30 funds when there are tens of thousands of investment funds out there in the universe. So ideally, as soon as you don't need the investment, you want to try and make sure you've got the access to take the capital back out to invest them however you wish, or to buy a home, or to do with whatever you like. But a lot of investment funds that meet the criteria tie the capital up for 8 to about 14 years. So again, you don't want to be stuck in something that is not maybe yielding a particularly good result longer than you need to. And be careful of fees. Again, Portuguese funds are notoriously quite expensive. There can be setup fees, management fees, performance fees, and exit fees. I don't mind paying the fees personally, as long as they're justified. But with a lot of Portuguese funds, they're not often justified. So just be mindful and making sure you've got a clear understanding of the cost as well. Be sure about how the returns are paid. Again, there's a difference between variable returns, fixed returns. Are the returns paid in advance? Are they paid at the end of a certain time frame? What is the investment risk? Again, similar to kind of security of capital. You want to be checking the kind of institutional risk for the capital, but also the investment risk as well. What are the chances of the value of that investment going down? What is the chance of the investment going down at the wrong time? Worst case scenario is investing into the stock market, and we've seen that come down by 20% in year 5. Just before you want to take that money back out, because you might find you're going to have to stay invested, to allow the investment to recover in value. But also the investment risk, that I've seen there are different providers that are looking to raise capital that on the surface of the project might sound quite exciting, but actually a brand new startup funds in some unproven sectors and can carry a very high level of risk and do run the risk of losing the entire capital sum. So just have your wits about you. Always seek advice on these things. Is it suitable if you are a US citizen? Make sure it is compliant for the US as well. The reporting standards to the US are much different to the rest of the world. You don't be kind of running into additional taxes. And yeah, where you can try and find any additional incentives as well, whether it's free legal fees, whether it's complimentary stays at nice hotels, cashback, this kind of stuff as well. It's always good to have. But yeah, for any questions, obviously, just ask. Yeah, ask me. Obviously, booking a one-to-one meeting, you've got my email address at the bottom. This will form part of our discussion, and of course, we'll help put you in touch with good, reputable fund managers that can help you with the fund selection. And just a quick point, of course, as I mentioned before, there is the option of the full financing on this route of 168,000. So rather than funding the full 500, you have the financing route as well. But yeah, for any questions, just drop me an email or drop in the Q&A. Now, option 2 is the investment into existing share capital of a Portuguese company. You can do that with an investment sum of 500,000 euros on the basis that the company maintains a certain number of jobs. And again, must be kept for the full duration of the investment. Now, a great example of the kind of things you want to be trying to look out for. And again, I'm not sure on availability at the moment for this particular one, but it is a great example of the type of thing we want to be looking for. Is investing where, first of all, you have asset-backed security and you have a predetermined exit and you have an upfront return. And in particular, you have the option of investing into the management company or the managing entity for a very nice 5-star golf and spa resort. And by doing so, you receive an upfront return of 101,000 euros, which reduces the capital from the investor to just 399, allows you to obviously keep money invested elsewhere, and 101,000 from that return. There is also a further loan option of 74,000, which brings the minimum capital down to 325. Just be mindful that if you take a loan, there is interest payable on that loan as well. There is a guaranteed exit at year 6 as well, so there's no kind of worry of the value increasing and decreasing. It is predetermined at 500,000. You have 399 going in, 500 coming out, in its simplest format, and yeah, that's all you need to know. Really, that is the essence of it. You do get a complimentary stay at this one in particular. You get 6 weeks. You get your out of stay at the resort for 6 weeks each year, free of charge. But more importantly, there is actually a physical property held as collateral against the investment as well. So if anything goes wrong in any way, shape, or form, or if there is an apocalyptic event in Portugal, the worst case scenario is that you get stuck with a very nice 5-star property, which is worth more than what you would have invested at any one time. So a great level of security there added as well. So like I said, it's just an example at this point. If you want to take a look at royalobidos.com, if it's something of interest, please do ask. But whether it's this or something similar, these are kind of the things that are out there within the hospitality sector. But there are variables as well. Like I said, I talk a lot about hospitality because it is often the only industry where you can see routes to the visa with less capital than 500,000, and also big incentives, really strong profit margins as well. Some do pay an annual return rather than an upfront payment, which can be more tax efficient sometimes. Some offer cashback. Sometimes there isn't a guaranteed exit, but you get a profit share when they come to selling the hotel, and that can add an additional capital, an additional capital profit at the end as well. But yeah, there's loads out there. They always change. Obviously, when we speak, I'll always give you kind of a snapshot of what's there on that particular day. I'll try and highlight pros and cons between the different investment routes. And yeah, like I said, whichever one you choose ultimately, we'll make sure that the application for the visa goes as quickly and smoothly as possible. And And yeah, we will very much look forward to working with you. I think it's time for me to get some tea, as we call it in the UK. And I look forward to speaking with everyone soon. All the best. Bye now.